Good evening. Welcome. I'm Jay Barth. I'm the director of the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. And here at the Clinton Presidential Center, we certainly seek to better understand the Clinton administration, its successes and its challenges, and the people who carried out that work. But we also seek to gain a deeper understanding of the 1990s, this important time in economic change, social change, and cultural change. And tonight's program is very much a look at a key aspect of the culture of the 1990s, the decade in film. This program comes out of an essay that Wesley Morris wrote in the New York Times last August on one of those years, 1999. It was the year he began his work as a film critic. It was also a year that ranged from the Blair Witch Project to Election to Fight Club. And Wesley concluded that it was maybe not the greatest year in film, but as he wrote, it was the most interesting year. We're also thinking about film around here because of our ongoing temporary exhibit, Commanding the Screen, the American Presidency in Film and Television, which closes at the end of this month, and I urge you to make it back to check it out if you've not done so already. So it felt right to invite Wesley Morris out to talk about the films not just of 1999, but of the 1990s generally. And Wesley Morris is critic at large for the New York Times, as well as co-host with Jay Wortham of the New York Times podcast, Still Processing. He's the only writer to have won the Pulitzer Prize for criticism more than once, winning in 2012 when he was at the Boston Globe, and in 2021 at the Times for his coverage of race relations in the United States. Showing the range of Wesley's interests, from 2013 to 2015, he wrote for ESPN's website Grantland. Tonight's Clinton Presidential Center Presents is co-hosted, as always, by the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service, and the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. Our additional partner for this evening is the Arkansas Cinema Society. And moderating the conversation is the Cinema Society's vice president, a writer, actor, and producer, Graham Gordy. A playwright by training, Graham wrote for the Sundance series Rectify, co-created the Cinemax drama Quarry, and wrote on HBO's third season of True Detective. His feature Dipshit Fever will shoot in 2025, directed by Dexter Fletcher, and he's currently developing a new series for FX. Please, let's welcome Wesley Morris and Graham Gordy.
Thank you, Jay. Wesley, welcome to Little Rock.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. It's nice to be here. It's very nice to be here. And everybody, if you have not seen the show upstairs, it's really good. The exhibit, Danny Glover and Morgan Freeman's costumes from their respective president role movies, among many other things. It's really good. So help yourselves. Awesome. That's my plug. I don't know. I was not told to say that, but I meant it.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to you about movies in the 90s. It's probably pretty heavily weighted in my mind because it was the era in which I sort of came of age in terms of film, so nostalgia probably plays in really heavily to this conversation.
Here, for these purposes, nostalgia can be a healthy thing. Okay. So this is a space where we can just be sad that we're not somewhere else in time. I'm not going back any farther than 1990, so.
So I want to kind of set the table mostly because when I started looking into and trying to remember the movies of the 90s, I was very surprised by how much was there and very depressed, frankly, of how many movies we were making back then and how few movies we are making now. But all right, so many would say it was the height of like Kiarostami, Keselowski, Errol Morris. It's one of the best decades for Scorsese, Spielberg, James Cameron, the Coen brothers, Spike Lee, Woody Allen, Mike Leigh, Jim Jarmusch. The reemergence of Terrence Malick and Stanley Kubrick for what would be his,
gonna make me
which
cry.
Would be, I know, right? For what would be his very last film. But here, possibly the most impressive part, the emergence of Tarantino, Richard Linklater, Wes Anderson, Spike Jonze, Alexander Payne, David Fincher, John Singleton, Darren Aronofsky, Steven Soderbergh, Sofia Coppola, and a lot more. All right, I'm just going to go kind of year by year and just name off a ton of movies.
Oh my God.
And then I want you guys to throw out some that I've missed, okay? All right, 90.
Did people or let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. Because it'll be interesting to see if people correspond, if their memory of the decade corresponds with a year and whether or not they can remember what movies came out which year. I think I can, so let's see how this goes.
Okay, I am not good at that because I looked
You've got
up
a list.
and I was, well, I know, that's why I have the internet. That's cool. So 90, you got Goodfellas, Miller's Crossing, Dances with Wolves, Misery, Reversal of Fortune, Ghost, Pretty Woman, Awakenings, Home Alone, Jacob's Ladder, The Freshman, Vincent and Theo, Life is Sweet. 91.
Wait, you say Goodfellas?
Goodfellas was first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Postcards from the Edge, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. Did you say Pretty Woman?
I said Pretty Woman.
Okay. Awakenings?
Awakenings, yeah. Penny Marshall.
We can't do this to ourselves. Go on. What's next?
All right. We're only
Hamlet.
We just got
Zeffirelli's Hamlet.
There you go.
With
Mel we're not
Gibson.
even to 91 yet, buddy. All
Sorry,
right,
okay.
hold on. All right, 91. Silence of the Lambs, Defending Your Life, My Own Private Idaho, Rhapsody in August, JFK, Barton Fink, Cape Fear, Thelma and Louise, Terminator 2.
Wow. Okay. Bugsy?
Yeah,
Did
that's
you
right.
say Bugsy?
No, I didn't say it, but that was a good call.
Keep going.
Okay, 92. Naked Lunch, Basic Instinct, Reservoir Dogs, The Player, Malcolm X, Last of the Mohicans, Unforgiven, Husbands and Wives, The Crying Game, Bad Lieutenant.
Keep going.
93, Groundhog Day. Let's just pause and appreciate that briefly.
What are we pausing to appreciate?
That it's Groundhog Day.
I actually watched this not that long ago and was like, listen, I didn't love it at the time, but boy, would I take 400 of those right now. Just a movie that's not supposed to mean anything, that like time accrues, and it suddenly seems like Socrates wrote it.
Yep, absolutely. Shortcuts, Jurassic Park, Dazed and Confused, The Piano, Fearless, Joy Luck Club, Schindler's List, The Age of Innocence, and Mike Leigh's Naked.
The Firm.
Yeah, that's true.
Was that Speed? Speed's the next year.
That's probably, yeah.
Speed's the
Speed
next
is
year.
94, along with a movie called Pulp Fiction, Hoop Dreams, Hudsucker Proxy, Shawshank Redemption, Chungking Express, Forrest Gump, Bullets Over Broadway, and Kieslowski's White and Blue both came out that year.
That might be. Is that the first Woody Allen movie you mentioned too? Like we skipped all the Woody Allen movies.
I thought I was going to slip over it.
So many Woody Allen movies, Shadows and Fog, Husbands and Wives.
Wives was 92.
That movie is deep. You watch that now. He was just telling you. He was telling you.
He was.
Listen, I got some issues. Here they are.
Yeah.
Their name is Juliet and Lewis. I'm going to, anyway, have you seen that movie ever? Have you seen Husbands and Wives? It's one of my favorite Woody Allen movies. And watching it now, as I did for a thing that I'm working on, I mean, it really is amazing how he just, these artists, they're trying to tell us what's going on in there, and we accept it as entertainment because it is, but also it's the shrink's office.
Yeah.
Also, Cape Fear. Did you say Cape Fear?
Cape Fear.
From 90, I think that's 91.
91.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, we got, because.
One of my favorite Scorsese's.
Honestly, with Scorsese, I mean, imagine. All right, Scorsese, you got Goodfellas in 90, Cape Fear in 91, Age of Innocence in 93, Casino in 95, and Bringing Out the Dead in 99. Probably
They're underrated Scorsese.
Bringing Out the Dead.
Bringing Out the Dead is that's the kind of movie that makes, well, let's just keep going, but that's the kind of movie that makes 99 so good, which is that it's not a movie that nobody in 1999 was trying to win an Academy Award, and the people who were didn't, We're trying. And yet, like, it wasn't as though the movie came out in the spring. I want to say, maybe it was the fall. I can't remember now. But it just was, it just wanted to be what it was and to get out whatever it wanted to get out of the person who wrote it and the person who directed it. And it's got a really good Nicolas Cage performance. Ving Rhames is really good in that movie. The movie is weird, but it also is this beautiful philosophical exploration of one day in the life of anyway, it's so deep. And all it wanted to do was just like entertain you for an hour to 2 hours. Too long. It's too long.
No, a Scorsese movie is too long. It's weird.
After Hours is like 89 minutes, so he can do it. It's in him.
It's in him.
He can be short.
Yeah. All right. So then you got 95 before, and I won't keep. I'm just trying to mention these so that you guys, and I also, so Before Sunrise, Dead Man, Leaving Las Vegas, Heat, Clockers, Toy Story in 95. I didn't know it went back that far. What's that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing everywhere. Waiting to Exhale. Yeah, no, Waiting to Exhale, huge.
Clueless.
He didn't
Casino.
say that. That's the first Whitney Houston movie you mentioned. Like, it's just, that was a crazy time. Whitney Houston was a movie star.
And then anyway, all right. So, all right. Anybody else throw out some of your favorite 90s movies that come to mind?
You might have said a lot of them.
I said a lot of them, but
I mean,
there's others in there.
That's like 2004.
I think that's right.
I think Walter Salles, the director of I'm Still Here, that man worked really hard to get a Best Picture nomination. It finally came true. Happy for Walter Salles. Yeah, I mean, but are we trying to? We're sad, right? This is
Well,
not a.
I wanted to mention all of those because it shows, and I just got to 95. It shows how many great movies we were making back then.
Right.
And
right.
now we make 8 a year. And
8 great movies or 8 movies, period?
We make 8 movies and we make 3 great ones.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
Right.
Yeah, that's shifted. I also think, I mean, you know, you are on the production side of things. You have a much clearer sense of what changed. I mean, I think I know, but I mean, I wonder what that shift is like from where you sit.
It's terrible, but I think that it was a combination. Well, and one of my questions for you was actually, part of me, I cannot look at the 90s through sort of clear glasses because of the nostalgia, but I'm also wondering if part of what colors this is, and my love for 90s movies, is the fact that the golden age of television started right after this, and sort of changed the nature of movie making, which then pushed us into streaming, and then movies kind of went away. Do you think, I guess what I'm saying is, do we think that we're sort of looking back in retrospect of the fact that we're just not, part of it is from the age at which we loved these, fell in love with movies, you and I, but also like that looking back with nostalgia over the fact that it is just the nature of the business has changed so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of everything. It's all the things, right? It's all of any explanation you can offer. Just about would explain how we get from a year like 1990 to a year like the one we just had, where, and I've really been thinking about how to think about this, like what the problem actually is. But if you look at, how thinking about how you get from a year like 1990 to a year like 2024, where one of the things, this is parenthetical, one of the things that I love about the Academy Awards is it is a really useful snapshot of what is going on in the movie business, right? The people who nominate these movies for Best Picture, the Academy is now about 10,000 members. In 1990, it was maybe 5,000 members, and that membership was mostly older white men. But those were also the people making the movies. So, I mean, it was an accurate reflection of a set of values. And you could look at those movies and you could see a story of what the voting members of the Academy thought was great. There was enough of a pool to trick you into thinking that those movies, well, I don't know if it was a trick. Like, I can see that the 5 movies they chose, I'm free to not like them. But there's enough overlap between popular taste and the Academy's preferences for there not to be a lot of tension from the standpoint of the members of this club putting a stamp on a thing that doesn't really have any bearing on either art or popular taste. It's just like the musings of these people wanting a pat on the back for liking something or wanting to tell a story about, what good taste they think they have. That story was one we were all interested in seeing and being a part of for many, many years. And sometime around the beginning of this century, that started to change, in part because of I'm trying to figure out where exactly someplace like HBO goes, where the values of movie making and of cinema become a part of the way a place like HBO functions. But I don't think that's an industrial concern. I think that's what we would call a flex, right? HBO is saying, hey, not only can we do premium movies, we can make original movies or original television shows that feel as good as movies. It wasn't, they were doing something that industrially was weird, right? We are gonna do serialized rather than episodic television. We're gonna have a show about a psychologically damaged, terrible human being named Tony Soprano and all of the shitty things that he and his family do, or, he and his friends do, including ruin lives, murder people, and but also to present that as a subject for psychological inquiry, right? That is a sort of morally brave thing to do. And I think the wrong lesson got learned from the streaming, from what wound up happening 15, 20 years later, where the streamers also became interested in bad people, but then they had no psychological underpinnings. Mm-hmm. So, it's just sort of network, what I'm gonna sort of reduce to, but don't believe about the networks, network vapidity, sort of migrating into these platforms where they need you to constantly be watching them. They will addict you to them, and you're not really inclined to really think about what you're engaging with. But this is a long way of saying that I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about why this year's Academy Awards feel remarkably different, and why the difference is bad versus what was going on in 1990. And some of the difference is very obvious. It's an industrial change. Only 4 of the major studios of the 10 movies nominated for Best Picture had Best Picture nominees. 2 of those things, one of those movies, it was Dune, which, it's another version of a story that keeps getting told. I don't know why. And the other one was Wicked, which is based on, basically another version of The Wizard of Oz. The other is Conclave, which the genesis of that is a little murky, but basically it's a Universal picture, but not Universal Pictures. and A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan movie, which is really the only kind of serious movie that Hollywood knows how to make now, which is a movie based on, I'm gonna just call the lives of other people IP. The biopic is essentially a Marvel movie with real people instead of Marvels. And so what fills the gap? A bunch of movies. The other 6 movies are movies that in theory would one of those 6 movies might be a nominee, but definitely not 6 of them at the same time, right? These are 6 movies that in other years would have been the 5th nominee. And now the Oscars, they need movies because Hollywood's not making anything the Academy would nominate. Plus there are more people from all over the planet in the Academy voting for these movies, whether they've made movies or not. That's a whole other series of problems. But basically, 1990 to 1999 looks so good because the movie distribution, making, and exhibition ecosystem was really healthy. And, there were far more American movies in the mix alongside all these great directors from all over the world. Maybe sometimes not great movies from all over the world that were just interesting, or somebody liked them a lot to keep going. But now that whole system is essentially dying, if not officially dead as of last year. And the question is that okay? And I don't know. I struggle with knowing what exactly the problem is, because there are a number of problems that I can point to, but if maybe the Oscars is the wrong framework to think about how to identify the problem, but I don't think so, because the Academy Awards, they're still an MRI of the business. Mm-hmm. And if you don't make the movies, you can't nominate the movies. And so I just hear I heard a lot of people this year talking about, I didn't see any of those movies. I don't know nobody told me those movies were out there. And it's true. People didn't know what Anora was before Anora was a Best Picture nominee, and they still kind of don't know. So there is, I don't know, something is broken down, and the pleasure that a lot of us used to get from going to the movies, we feel we can't have anymore.
Right.
Because the infrastructure is different.
And some of that probably has to do also with the fact that, at least especially in the early to mid 90s, there was still, it was a thriving, the independent film was actually thriving, and then essentially the studios decided, oh, okay, well, we're going to put up this shingle that is Focus, that is Paramount Vantage,
the boutique,
that is
the quote
the sort of
boutique
the boutique studio
studios.
that we don't have to pay people all of the money when they buy this thing at Sundance or whatever festival. We now can just do it all in-house and call it an independent film.
Yeah, that was definitely the beginning of some kind of shift, because think about all the movies that came up through those boutique studios. Right? Like major movies that also, but that became the Oscar lab, basically, right? All those movies at those Paramount Vantage, Focus Features. There's some obvious ones that I'm not remembering, but those basically.
Miramax.
Miramax is a different thing, though. Once Disney bought Miramax, that's what Miramax became.
Right.
But Miramax was a crazy little weird company that, eventually Harvey Weinstein figured out, or he probably knew all along, the two of them, that they could get to the Academy Awards, but that was not, they weren't making Oscar movies at first. I think Harvey Weinstein bent the Academy, or seduced, I don't know. Well, I don't know how he works. He did the thing that he does to the Academy to make them want a movie that they typically wouldn't necessarily nominate. But also he had the culture on his side, because a lot of those Miramax movies were just big hits. And it wasn't hard for an Academy member to just want to vote for Cider House Rules. I think that's a Miramax movie. Or Chocolat, or Pulp Fiction, because they were popular in Academy members' households as much as they were popular in civilian moviegoers' households.
All right, this is sort of an insane question, which probably means it's a bad question. I mean, I'm looking
bad
for kind
questions.
I'm looking for kind of a running theme, some sort of any sort of controlling idea for movies in the 90s. And all I really notice as they go along is that they are getting weirder, grittier, more unhinged generally, or at least at the very least less glossy, right? But I mean, what do you notice as being, I don't know, main trends or thematic, or are there any?
I don't know. This is another thing I'm kind of struggling with, like in terms of, movie history. Because there's always been weird movies, right? Like there's just, if you think about like, Imitation of Life is a weird movie, if you think about it. I mean, it's weird about it's identifying what's weird about this country, but the movie itself is a melodrama that is also a national tragedy, right? And it takes what at that point was like 250 years of American life, or almost 300 years of American life, and like setting it within this one family without ever really having to say that that's what was happening. You could, as a viewer, understand that you were watching something very deep and dark and lurid go on within the lives of these four women. And, that by the end, someone essentially is punished for having made the choice to live as... There's punishment for having chosen to live as a white woman, as a black woman. The Godfather. I was watching that movie a couple weeks ago. That movie is really strange. I mean, they're all movies, the memorable ones are partially memorable because there is something about them that is simultaneously outside the bounds of what we as regular people would do or individual humans would do. And the beauty of the art is that it's unleashing something that, it's somewhere in us that we don't fortunately have access to. These darknesses, these primal, visceral urges. And partially what the art does is create a sounding board, a template for us to understand some part of ourselves, which I would say is one of the tragedies of the thing about American movies that's happening now, which is that like we aren't even telling stories about ourselves, like as regular civilian people. Like in 20 years, I don't know what we look back on to understand the way we can look back on 1990 and really see who we were as a people. I don't know what that looks like for people in 2046 to be looking back at 2019 to see what American life was like. It's all Chris Evans in that suit. I mean, it's Thor, it's Black Widow, it's Black Panther. I mean, it's just that to me feels more tragic. It isn't that I have a problem with superhero movies. It's more that I have a problem with making nothing that goes alongside those movies, right? And that to me is
maybe the escalation of that is that we're now making genre films or television shows like The Penguin, for instance, which it's just a genre piece. And really,
based on
that doesn't really need to have anything to do with superheroes or DC or whatever. It's just
why isn't it called Gangster?
That's a great question.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like
it's well done. Like I'm not.
It is. This is
like
not about.
Like it's extremely, but it is like why does it have to be? Why does it have to be that?
Well, I think the thing that makes a show like Penguin interesting is that it is that, though, right? I mean, part of I don't know if it's not quite getting 200 points for putting your name at the top of the test, but you are kind of spotting it a little something for being an interesting version of a thing you thought you were tired of. And there is some achievement here in terms of what the actors are doing and the story that's being told. But I don't know, that's still not a substitute for, like, I'm just gonna say, a Sally Field movie. I don't even know that I want a Sally Field movie. But like 40 years from the inciting incident of like Murphy's Romance, I'm like, you know what would be really nice right now? Let's just get Emma Stone and, I don't know, get Emma Stone and Bradley Cooper together and make them do Murphy's Romance again. Except don't call it that and don't remake it. Just write another script. That movie's not hard to do. Just make something else up for those people to do. Because the index of like, I mean, Waiting to Exhale is another great example. Like, the book existed. Somebody smartly thought, why don't we take this extremely popular book, get 4 good actors in it, and see what happens. And there is obviously an appetite. Well, talking about, when you talk about a black audience being underserved, like, there's also an inherent appetite in that. But just as stories go about human beings, the idea that we just are no longer interested in, or the industry, I should say, is no longer interested in trying to tell those stories, either because they don't play in China, which is part of the problem, or because they're not going to make $300 million anywhere. That doesn't feel good either. Sorry? Right. That's a story about people. I mean, again, like, not that. It's crazy to say you would make Boys in the Hood now, but you wouldn't make Boys in the Hood now. Right. There'd be nobody at a studio to know to even greenlight it. So there's that.
And you definitely wouldn't make Rosewood.
Well, yeah, but actually they would try to do Rosewood, because that is a movie that could take somebody to the Oscars. It's a serious movie about. It's an American story that also has a more conventional period dimension that also involves a kind of tragic event. You just need a better filmmaker than John Singleton was at the time to do it. I don't know, but that's another story for another time.
All right, since we're at the Clinton Presidential Library, I'm just going to name some political movies in the 90s, all right?
Okay.
We got JFK, 91. Sure.
Talk about a weird movie. Have you guys watched that recently? I mean, we all knew it was weird at the time, but I had to watch that. I was going to write something. I don't know if I really went. I don't know if it wound up in the finished version of a thing I wrote, but wow, that movie is crazy.
It's 3.5 hours, and it doesn't make any sense why it works, but it
just works.
It works. It's completely compelling. It defies every structural, it defies every rule.
I think it was probably a movie that was found in the editing room. I don't know if he knew what he had when he was shooting it, but Oliver Stone, I mean, is just really willing to show and imply some wild stuff, and it just, I don't know if you need to believe it to also find it compelling. And then there's just, I mean, and then it culminates in this trial sequence with Kevin Costner, who at the time was laughed out of the movie theater by most people who saw this movie, because why him? But if it had to be him, he was the biggest wholesome movie star. It made sense for Oliver Stone to cast the cleanest movie star we had at that moment in the trashiest movie anybody had ever made up to that point about a president.
And you also have Tommy Lee Jones, Joe Pesci, and Kevin Bacon doing the most insane stuff that those actors have ever done on a screen.
That movie is deep.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, JFK, crazy movie.
Dave. 93. The War Room. Because we're here. 93.
Documentary, yeah.
The American President, 95.
Yes. There's a movie. I mean, I'm sure.
Then it starts to get a little weirder, right? Citizen Ruth, right? Wag the Dog,
Sure.
Primary Colors,
Yeah.
98, and Bulworth, 98.
These are the movies about presidents. These aren't even the movies that have presidents in them.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there was I think that the Clinton presidency unleashed something. And I mean, even before the scandal, the big scandal, I think there was something about Bill Clinton himself that, I don't know, he was kind of an avatar, a new avatar in a way that, nobody really wanted to depict. Let me think about this. Because Reagan was kind of a totalizing idea, right? If you go back and look at the values of the 80s movies, it's quite clear that capitalism is driving the plots of so many of these movies. If the movies weren't about the people making the money, it was about those people's kids, right? The parents were out making the money. You probably didn't even see the parents, so you got Elizabeth Shue to babysit your kids while you were out making the money, and that's where the fun happened. Like the Reagan principles were supreme during those 10 years. And it was really about deviancy on the one hand, but also kind of capitalism as an emotion. Like every person, all the big movies, think about like Fatal Attraction, for instance. To me, it's a great movie, but it also is a great document of a moment in this country in terms of what it was prioritizing. There's this movie about two people at work who meet at a party, then meet at a meeting, and decide at the meeting that the post-meeting lunch, you know what? We're adults. You know what we can do with our Saturday afternoon where they made us come to work? We can go fuck. Wouldn't that be hot? And they go and do it. And the crime of the movie is not the affair. It's kind of that they used work as a backdrop to do it, right? And who winds up killing the mistress in the relationship? The woman with no job.
It's the bad guy in the
It's just the last shot of that movie is the Reaganist shit I have ever seen. It is Glenn Close is dead in the version that America said it wanted in those Canoga Park test screenings. Like the version of the movie they wanted was not Michael Douglas goes to jail because this movie is following the arc of Madame Butterfly the opera. Michael Douglas is originally supposed to go to jail for possibly killing Glenn Close, even though we would have known that she had killed herself. It's inconclusive, and she goes to jail because he's a suspect for possibly murdering her. The movie America wanted was to see Aunt Archer blow her brains out. They wanted Glenn Close to be a crazy person who comes to their house to try to kill everybody. She has kidnapped the daughter at this point, killed the bunny, and what America really wanted was a conclusive ending that ended in Glenn Close's death. Anyway, Glenn Close is dead. The family is presumably going to stay together. And the last shot of that movie is a tracking shot into a framed photo of mother, father, daughter. And the credits start to roll. Fatal Attraction. The audience demanded version, the audience cut. So anyway, I just feel like that, to me, that whole era of the 80s was about Ronald Reagan in one way or another. Whether it was, the way drugs functioned, the way money functioned, the way the family functioned. And the 90s was really, like Clinton, the 90s were crazier, they were wilder, they were more violent. There was a war happening, but there was also something about having a president who had never fought in one. The riots. It was the ways in which what was happening on the streets and, outside the movie theater sort of entered the movie theater was fascinating. I am one of these people, conveniently, who does believe that presidencies kind of inform. They are a framework through which to think about how popular culture operates, whether it's in opposition to a power structure or operating in league with it, which is another reason that it's a wild time to have the movies malfunctioning, right? Because this is a moment to be subconsciously and consciously channeling whatever is going on right now. And we just don't have the infrastructure to do it. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but...
No, it helps. All right, let's open it up to, yes, sir.
Well, I was just thinking about how you were talking about how the 90s were sort of wild and all this. It makes me think about, the grunge and
Yeah, man, yes.
listening back to the music of the 90s compared to now. Alternative music was sort of taking off, and it just reminds me.
I mean, hip hop was like right there. I mean, those two art forms were in not conversation with each other, but not in tension either. They were both reactions. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted your question.
Well, no, it just makes me think about it. Listening back to the music from that era, it's just so angry. The angst and the anger, and you were sort of talking about how the movies were sort of sort of weird and unsettled, and it sort of makes me think of there was just something in that time period that sort of went along with that.
Yeah, I mean, rage wasn't, I don't know, I would not characterize the prior decade as an angry one. I think the 70s were much more prone to find these like explosions of personality. I think the 90s, the filmmaking changed, right? I mean, just looking at the movies Oliver Stone made during that decade operated with a kind of visual chaos, right? He was never satisfied having a camera just sit there and watch people do things. The camera not only had to be moving, but he was changing film stocks. Thinking about like the way he treated Richard Nixon it was like watching an episode of Batman. All the canted angles, that like intense interrogation room lighting for him and Joan Allen, who plays Pat Nixon. I'm just using him as a for example, but because he's somebody who is also dealing with presidential power. And then by the time you get to something like Natural Born Killers, which is him like misapprehending, I think, a Quentin Tarantino script, you were getting a piece of filmmaking that very much to me in its energy corresponds with what grunge and hip hop are doing. There's like an anger, but also like a psychopathology there. Like all of these politicians' worst fears about those musics is very present in a movie like Natural Born Killers, right? And I don't know. It was in the culture war resistance to what was happening was not strong enough to stop anybody from wanting to see it. Is the other thing, or any of this work. And there was a real wearing down of resistance to like what I would describe as like wild art. It had just kind of taken over the like public imagination, but also the marketplace in some way.
I mean, and going back to the 70s, it's interesting because it also has to do with the nature of the business at this time, where in the 70s you had the sort of inmates running the asylum. You had actual
studio system had collapsed.
Artists in the studio.
Right.
And then you have Jaws and Star Wars making everything a blockbuster, so the 80s became bigger and safer in a way. And then in the 90s, sort of independent films kind of made their way around the edges and then became more prominent. And then when we get to the 2000s up to now, it's like we went to big and safe again to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, right? Because the studio system had fallen apart by the late 60s. You had all of these young people, or much younger people, running the studio system, and the priorities had basically changed, right? The original moguls were, these Jews who came to the U.S. and wanted to create a spectacle that kind of took the attention off the anti-Semitism that they were trying to escape coming over here. So they invented a country that didn't exist, right? They invented a whiteness that didn't exist. They invented an America that didn't exist. But somehow they managed to bring a lot of the bad shit about America into this spectacle. It was running on darkness. And then by the time you get to the 70s, the running on darkness is really all there is, where like even the musicals look like they're in a gang. And I think that like by the time you get to Reagan like officially really hated everything that was happening in the 70s, right? Like artistically, he hated Roots. Thought Roots was like mean to white people, which hello, I mean, but he was not going to have that. He didn't want it, and I think that part of the shift by the time you get to the 2000s is there are just so many other, I mean, this is not a deep thing to say, but like we just don't have time to notice what we're not even noticing anymore, right? Like our attention is now like pulled in so many different directions that, I mean, like what is nostalgia, right? How would nostalgia even function? What would you be nostalgic for? Nostalgic is now, according to my 11-year-old niece, who doesn't really know what nostalgia is, but like she's missing trends, she's missing things. She's like, oh yeah, I really miss that thing that was popular 6 months ago. I'm like, you're still wearing it. She's like, yeah, but we moved on. And I think that there's just, time is a really hard thing to understand right now. And I think that a lot of people are getting away with a lot of stuff because we actually don't have time to figure out what is happening. Whether it's like in our government or in our art, we just don't have time.
That's true.
The 1990s, I wanted to just start out like there was the movies I know, the black movies, but then there was a lot of string about the Holocaust, and those movies were good too. I saw Schindler's List, The Pianist. There was another one after that, and I'm just saying. And then I was going to name something else. I forgot. There was another strand of movies in the 90s. I just forgot what it was. It was I didn't like the New Jack movies. But, the artistic movies, The Crying Game. This is what I'm going to say. The movies back then, to me, like The Crying Game, the movie was kind of dull, but it was about something in Ireland, but all people remember about was this actor.
Oh, sure.
Something like that. So I'm saying it wasn't focused. Like today, let's say it's a movie, the homosexuality is the focus of the movie instead of the artistic part. And like in the Jewish movies back then, it was the acting, and it wasn't just, the Holocaust and the Nazis and all that. So now it seems to be more focused to the
So you're making
character
basically,
as opposed to the times or the backdrop. It's like character driven, and what their title is as opposed to the whole movie.
I hear that. This is the like movie. I mean, can I paraphrase? This is the movies too woke argument, basically?
No, it's not. No, these are the movies I saw, and that's what I saw at the time.
Right, but you're observing a change where.
No, I don't consider it woke. I was watching the movies at the time. I try to guess which one would be the Oscars, and I like good acting as opposed to this is about a person and they're homosexual or something like that. It's the movie itself,
Right.
not just the focus of the titles of who they are. Schindler's List was about this, but it was the acting. I mean, you knew, like Conclave, I'm going to mention that the acting is wonderful, but
Yeah.
the ending is terrible.
But the movie's not about the ending. The movie is about all the things that make the ending plausible.
I saw Apocalypse Now, and it's like that ending was silly. So I'm saying, to me, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Figures in It's just my opinion.
Oh, I hear that.
The whole movie in the 90s.
All right, I'm gonna find you. We're gonna talk about Conclave when this is over. Just hold on. Who's next?
I think we had one back there.
Okay, you next.
I was reading this book about the history of VR, and they were
Virtual
talking,
reality, like
Yeah,
Okay.
virtual reality, and the writer talks about cinema a lot in that, and they talk about how back in the 80s they were watching all these experimental art films, and they had this logic exercise where they joked about how in the future everything will be filmed, someone's whole life will be filmed, but in a situation like that, like when everything's documented, time is like you were just mentioning about time being weird, like time gets kind of flattened. And I wondered what you guys thought about social media, YouTube, in this pervasive camera. Everyone can make a film. What does that do to creativity across a culture? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. It's actually a great question because, throughout the history of movies, the movies were always reacting to some competitive, alternative entertainment source, right? And they would use the art form itself would combat the rival, the movies were always making movies about how terrible television was, how evil television was. TV was always evil in the movies. And then in the 80s, it was really about like how bad the VCR was, or like these alternative technologies to watch movies. Any incursion into the Hollywood, into the dollar, the money that the movie studios would make, would somehow be. You can find a subgenre of it in the movies. And there was a brief moment in the in the 2000s where The Ring had identified, and a lot of these found footage horror movies were like the villain is the internet, right? The villain is your phone. They really, and those movies were they made their money back, and people liked them, and they kept making them. There was one of those every month. There was some sort of found footage movie. And I think the movies were really happy always to have a rival to make movies about. And at some point, and it was probably the paranormal movies, that was the series where the rival kind of took it over and they didn't even know, right? Where the sort of formal competition in the form of these surveillance videos, it became the sort of do-it-yourself idea of those movies kind of ate an aspect of the industry. And the question that I always have in this sort of diminished moment of sort of movie innovation is, what would it have looked like, not necessarily to make an enemy of something like TikTok, but like to appropriate its aesthetic in terms of how storytelling works. Sean Baker, the guy who just won 4 Oscars for Anora, that guy, 2 movies before Anora, had made something called Tangerine, which is just a wild movie about 2 trans sex workers in Los Angeles that was shot on an iPhone. That was the big deal about Tangerine when it came out, was that Sean Baker had made it just using his own, like one iPhone, I think, maybe 2, but I don't know. The whole thing was shot on an iPhone. And that was like both eye-opening and I think a threat to the way the movies thought things were going to operate. But it was an interesting prospect. And '99 was also a great year for these same questions, with the arrival of things being shot on video. The Phantom Menace on the one end of things was the first completely digitally shot movie, I believe. I'm going to get something wrong about that, but it was the first big movie shot completely digitally. And then the Blair Witch Project, on the other hand, was shot, on a camcorder and released on, shot on video essentially, and then, released everywhere in that format. So we've had these moments where the format of how movies are made and distributed and exhibited has changed. I truly am curious to to know what would happen. But if you know, the movie sort of took TikTok seriously. But I actually think that, I don't know that the audiences really care because they have TikTok already, right? There is the movie theater of your phone that is kind of, it's not answering your question, but it is satisfying a need that competition, that I think healthy creative competition between these art forms that has existed for like 100 years used to satisfy for people who went to the movies. This woman here has we have 25 seconds.
Well, there's a clock here that's an anxiety machine that's just ticking at us.
Can we get permission?
Yeah, we can take one more, right?
Okay.
I'm curious about women making films. How would it have looked different in whatever way if there had been more women who had found the money, did what it took to make more films during?
You know what's wild about this moment? Every week, some preservationist, some curator is digging up some movie that a woman made, and you're like, oh, well, this is from 1930? Is it from 1904? Was she working alongside Preston Sturges? No, the movie's from 1982. It's from 1990. And I was going to the movies every 10 minutes in 1990, and there are some of these movies I have never heard of that got, played at Film Forum on Houston Street in New York City for like a week and then disappeared. There are so many women who are making so many movies that so many people never saw. The movies that the women who were making movies were about were so personal and specific that they got written off as being for and about women, as opposed to women's pictures when men made them. I watched Crossing Delancey. It was on, have you guys seen this movie, Crossing Delancey?
30, yeah.
It suffered from being the Jewish Moonstruck, which is unfortunate because they came out within a year of each other. Crossing Delancey is 88 and Moonstruck's 87. I think I'm right about that. Anyway, Moonstruck's like a truly magical, once-in-a-lifetime movie. Crossing Delancey is its like cousin. And that movie is so funny and so strange and so charming and so utterly set in the three blocks it mostly exists in. And Joan Micklin Silver, the woman who made it, you don't know what a studio note to her for this movie would even look like. What are they going to tell her? This is a life experience. And I don't know if it's her personal life experience, but she knows these people and these characters. And this movie wasn't made to make $1 zillion and conquer the Academy Awards. It just was made to delight people and make them happy, which is what it did. And I don't know. Joan Micklin Silver did work, but she wasn't Mike Nichols. She wasn't Taylor Hackford. She wasn't Stephen Frears. I could go on for an hour naming all the people who made a type of movie. Fred Skepsey, who made a type of movie that she made. Frank Oz, slightly different, but you get it. Anyway, it's a real shame. I would like to think, definitely TV streaming opened up a lot of doors, and that is kind of a place where it's not that inconceivable. You see many more shows run by women, but it has not even remotely solved the movie problem, even though last year was maybe the best, at least for me as a moviegoer, it had the most robust number of movies made by women about the most different things from all over the world. I think it's changed, and I think in this environment where, what is a big Hollywood movie, it looks more equitable, but I think that's a smokescreen for actual deep infrastructural, industrial problems that people are trying to address it, but these people don't want to change. They don't really want to do it because, they don't think that a movie by a woman about women is ever really going to make money in China. I will harp on that, but it's really one of the business incentives that I mean, am I speaking out of turn?
That the international market is now eclipsing everything in terms of casting, in terms of content, in terms of everything, and like what an actor means in Eastern Europe as opposed to when it's like it is really, that is one of the dozen or so major problems with what's going on right now, for sure.
Thank you.
Well, Wesley, thank you so much for coming all the way to Arkansas. We're at 0.0, but I bet that you guys can ask him some more questions afterwards. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
out.
coming. Appreciate it.
And Kathleen wants to say a few words. Oh, yeah.
Right, audience selfie, don't forget.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
All right, we're trying something new this evening. They're gonna take a selfie with y'all in the background. While they're doing that, you're gonna listen to me for just a second. I'm Kathleen Pate. I am the Director of Education and Public Programs here at the library. Big smiles. Want to thank you for coming out tonight. Let you know about a couple of programs that we're having in March. We're actually going off-site. So a week from today, the library is partnering, the Clinton Library is partnering with the Central Arkansas Library